Our guest today is a hugely successful and influential talent manager and reality star who began his career on The Only Way is Essex back in 2013. He has since branched out to the sports industry and has started up The Huge Project, where he manages elite talent, including John Ryder, Joe Cordina, and Connor Ben, as well as the reality stars Chloe Sims, Demi Sims, and Frankie Sims. Alongside his agency work, he recently re-entered the reality TV world, having co-produced and co-starred in his family's first ever reality show, House of Sims. After an amazing response to Series 1, he is now in the works to make Season 2. Please welcome Charlie Sims.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, thank you so much. All the way live from LA. So, Charlie, listening to that bio in that introduction, it's like you're the man that has it all. And by the way, you're only 30. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm 31 now. So we're going to have to add on the one.
Okay. But you have achieved and done so much for like a 31-year-old lad from Essex. And so what I love about this podcast, and I just love getting to know who you are, what made you the huge success that you are. And I know that this is just the beginning for you and your family, especially with the TV show and everything coming along. Like, where did it all begin? What was little Charlie Sims like growing up?
So I guess growing up, and if we really rewind back and go back to like the school days, if you like, I was a bit of a terror, really. I was a bit of a class clown. I wasn't really smart. I wasn't really academic. I didn't really particularly enjoy school. I enjoyed the social aspect of it, playing football in the lunch breaks and kind of hanging around with my friends and laughing and joking. But I don't think I was ever like into education at all. So, those sort of days for me were like, once I got to 16 years old and I had the opportunity to leave school, I was pretty quick to take that. And I said to my parents, I want to go to work. I just don't feel like going to sixth form or college or university is going to be for me. So that was kind of that kind of era, if you like. But it's strange because as you get older, and especially now that I've been working for myself the last decade or so, education is something that I try to do on a daily basis. So it's just funny how things change. And actually how much I took school for granted at the time. I think we all probably did. And if we could all kind of rewind back and go back to those days, we'd all realise that they were quite a lot easier. But
yeah, totally. Yeah. And I completely relate to that. When you feel like you have to learn, it's like you don't want to. But when you have the choice to and you do it because you want to, it just feels like such a pleasure.
Yeah, and I had certain subjects that I was really into. But everything else outside of that, I just couldn't do it. Like, I had no interest at all. I just remember the day that I got my GCSE results with my parents. We was actually on a family holiday, and it was just such a disappointing day. A disappointing day. And I remember thinking, okay, well, I need to go off out into the real world, and I need to change that. So, education wasn't for me, but it is now. So, that's just the way life goes.
Love that. And Charlie, what was your family dynamic? You are one of four and you're the only boy within your family, right?
Yeah, the only boy, 3 sisters. I'm the second oldest, Chloe being the oldest, and then Frankie and Demi. We had a really, really tight-knit bond growing up. Obviously, myself, Frankie and Demi all lived together. And then Chloe's 10 years older than me, so we lived together for quite a little while. And then she eventually moved out and did her own thing at quite a young age. So it was mainly just me, Frankie and Demi, who lived together, went to school together, and did all the kind of family holidays, if you like. But we were really close.
So nice.
Yeah, it is. And we have our tiffs, obviously, as family members do, but we've been really fortunate up to this point to have a really close relationship, and we obviously all work together on the show or across The Only Way is Essex. I'm not sure if we did cross over. I definitely crossed over with Demi. I'm not sure if I did with Frankie though. I definitely spent a lot of time with Chloe, but we are going back quite a bit, probably
Yeah.
about 7 or 8 years now. So, but I mean, House of Sims came around, which we'll probably get onto in a bit. And we just remained really close, and we all made that leap to go to that show and work together again. So, yeah, super fortunate that I got to share those experiences with my family.
That is amazing. And like something that I think all of our listeners would, it's like the dream relationship, isn't it? And I suppose a lot of people just don't have that kind of family type bond. Like they might feel like they're on their own, or they might, have friends that they lean on, but not that. And I think that's why, especially for the success of your show, why it is so successful. I mean, we will get onto that, but as in people just the same as the Kardashians, right? House of Sims, the Kardashians, like that tight family bond is what people just love and they just wish so much for in their own life.
Yeah, and I think a bit like the Kardashians, you kind of watch them, and they're so close, and they all kind of experience things together, and yet they have their highs and lows together. And
Yeah.
in your lows, you can either be arguing with a sibling, or you can be picking the sibling up. So we kind of have that relationship too, and that's probably why a lot of people relate us a lot to the Kardashians. But
Yeah.
I think we're very different. We come from very different beginnings, and like you said earlier, humble beginnings. But
Yeah.
and them guys kind of had very different starts.
Yeah, definitely.
However, our goal is to catch up. So we'll see how it goes.
So talk to me about your humble beginnings, Charlie. What did that look like?
Yeah, I think for me, like when I say humble beginnings, I came from probably a middle class family, if we were going to categorize it. But I lived in a really nice house. My dad and mum have always been hard workers throughout their whole life. Originated from the East End, so they kind of brought that hard working mentality into our home. Certainly for me, anyway. Not too much for my sisters, but I think as the only and eldest boy, my dad kind of installed into me that if you weren't going to have any GCSEs, you're going to have to enter the real world, and I'm going to show you what the real world is actually like. And he had some really good connections, and he actually managed to get me a good job. My first job when I was 16 was a quantity surveyor, which is a really good job, solid job, and you do have to go to college to do that. And it was the summer at this point, and I'd left school, and he said, but I'm going to show you the other end of the scale, and I want you to understand that there's nothing wrong with this job, but if life doesn't pan out for you, this is potentially where it could go. And he got me a job in a t-shirt factory, being a person who really folds up t-shirts once they're printed, which is probably in terms of like working in a factory, it's probably the lowest job that you can do in terms of hierarchy. So he put me in there, and oh my gosh, it was hot. It was early starts. I was doing the 6 a.m. shift, and coming from straight out of school, 16, you just don't do 6 a.m. shifts. So he would pick me, he would wake me up, he'd get me in the shower, he'd get me dressed and drop me off at that 6 a.m. start, and then he'd show me what the paycheck, he'd give me a paycheck. At the end of the week, I got paid weekly, and it was like £60 for the week, something like that. So, I experienced that, and I couldn't wait to get out of that, actually. And I did that for a few months before my job actually started as a quantity surveyor. And then I got into that, and I did enroll in college. But, although he told me the grass was greener being a quantity surveyor, it just wasn't for me. I just wasn't built for that 9 to 5 office job. Although I was kind of out on site doing a few bits, trying to get out of the office, that was kind of like the best case scenario presented to me. And entrepreneurship and being your own boss and working on your own schedule wasn't really an option. So, and rightly so, I wasn't experienced enough, nor was I educated enough. So I had to go into the real world and do these jobs. And I just decided that, being a QS wasn't for me. And I guess, although it was a really unfortunate time for a lot of people, we was going through a credit crunch. And I actually got made redundant after about 8 months. But I feel like that was maybe a blessing in disguise, because it just wasn't for me. So I dipped out of college. And actually a fun fact for anybody who's listening, and any Towie fans out there, I was actually in the same college class as Tommy Mallet. And that was the first time we ever met.
Yeah.
And we were both 16 years old. And he was training to be he was training to be a surveyor of some sort as well. And we just, out of coincidence, happened to enroll in the same class, same place, same time. And we both enrolled and we both dipped out at the same place, same time. So, that was quite a funny story as well that we'll come back to. But I kind of left that, and I was kind of 17 at this point, looking for a new chapter, a new start. And then I entered a few jobs, but the main job that I got when I was 17 was I become a broker, a junior broker in the city, and I got my first opportunity there, which I took with both hands. And I stayed there for quite a number of years, worked in the financial industry for a few years before I left to do towing. So we can really go through all the jobs if you want, Nicola, but there's quite a few.
But I love that, because I feel like there's such a pressure, when you're at school to be like, right, what are you going to do? What, when you grow up, what do you want to be? And, who the fuck knows? No one really knows. Like, I didn't even know who I was when I was at school, so, and the person that I could become if I'd have done, if I did the other work that we'll talk about, later on. But it's like, I just love that, because it's the success that you've had, completely, less school, no GCSEs, which at the time feel like everything. And they don't, and they're like, oh my God, this is so bad. Oh my God, I got a D at maths. Like, who cares? No one cares. It's so irrelevant, but it just feels so important at the time. So to show that you've gone on and had so much success is just amazing. So quick question, Towie question, just on a personal note. So when I watched Towie, it looks like you're all absolute the best mates and you all know each other. Is that right or not? Like you said, obviously you knew Tommy, but did you actually know the people within the class?
Not necessarily. I think we know of each other.
Okay.
And by the time I got there, the show had already been running for a certain amount of seasons, so I was aware of who was on the show and who wasn't. But I think, especially from the originals, my sister was an original. She was in season 1, I think. And she didn't really know anybody. She'd heard of a few people. And I knew a few people that were originals, and I was aware of the people that were in the show. But Tommy Mallet came in after me, actually. We did cross over for a bit. And, it was just by coincidence that I knew him, and I hadn't seen him since that day. So we were 16 at that time, and I hadn't seen him since, hadn't heard from him since. Social media wasn't a thing back then. There was Facebook, but no one was really using it that much. And I didn't see him until the day he came on the show, and I was really surprised. But, sometimes this, somebody gave me this advice and this quote once. They said, you always meet people twice in life. So be careful how you treat them the first time around. And fortunately, I was very good friends with Tommy whilst we were at college, and I was happy to see him come on the show the second time around that I met him. So, but that's just the way it goes. And he went on to build a really amazing, great empire with his shoe brand. So, but no, we don't. People didn't really know each other in the show. You kind of get to know each other and become friends with each other after spending so much time together.
Of course, yeah.
But we didn't really know each other. I knew my family members at the time, which was Chloe, Joey was in the show at the time, and that was about it.
So let's talk about basically the moment that changed your life. Did you audition for Towie, or was it because your sisters were already in it that they invited you? How did that come about? And also, were you like, I can see this show is happening. Could you see yourself in it? Did you visualize yourself being invited to go on it? Tell me everything.
Well, at the time, like I said, I had a good job. I was a financial broker, a junior one, and I worked through for about 4 years until I eventually became a broker on the phones. That's how we used to say it back in the day. It was actually trading. So I eventually started trading. I was making good money. I had my life all panned out. I enjoyed my job. I enjoyed the people that I worked with every day. We become like a bit of a family. So I don't really have any interest in kind of moving from there. And like I said before, we entered a bit of a credit crunch. And funnily enough, when you go into trading, that's quite a good thing, because it means the markets are volatile, things are going up and down, and things are trading. But unfortunately, after 4 years, maybe 5 years of spending time doing that job, the market really started to balance out and things started to slow down. And when things started to slow down, people didn't trade. And when people didn't trade, we didn't make money. So what ends up happening is people get cut. And there was a lot of people at the time losing their jobs, senior people that were earning good money, not so much me, because even though I'd just become a broker, I wasn't on mega money like some of these other guys, but they were starting to lose their job, and it just started to become a very negative environment. And every day I was going in and people were just talking about losing jobs and what they were going to do and what am I going to do if I lose my job. And I was like, I have kind of got another option here. It wasn't the first time that Towie had come and knock in. They kind of asked me, and I think Chloe and Joey have said to me before, if you ever wanted to come on a show, we'd put a hand out to help you come on. So the invite was always there.
Amazing.
And yes, I did have to audition, but it was more of a screen test to see if I was actually compatible with being on camera. But weirdly enough, the first time I did it, they didn't like it. They came back, they ended up coming, and that was at the Lime Studios office in London at the time, and they just didn't like it. And they were like, we don't really know if you're really suitable for this. So I said, okay, look, can we try again? And they came back to my house where I lived at the time, and they set up the cameras again, and we shot in my house. And they were like, yeah, we think if you're this person and you're the real authentic you, I think you're going to do very, very well, which was quite an interesting sign, because maybe the first time that I went for the audition or the screen test, I wasn't particularly being myself, which you learn over time.
Yeah.
So
that's so interesting. I mean, how did that make you feel, like that rejection?
I think I was just probably at a point where I was I don't really know if this is the right word, but I suppose there was a little bit of desperation, in a sense that I didn't really know where I stood in life at that point. Yeah. Everything that I thought I'd figured out was kind of looking like it was going to end. And then I was kind of on the search for something new, and I was looking at like Joey and Chloe, and they were doing very, very well.
Yeah.
And their workload was almost a third or a quarter of what I was doing. Yeah. And I was thinking, maybe it's time to switch. And I'd spoken to my boss at the time, and he said to me, look, I think it's a good idea if you go off and maybe you can come back to broking one day, which was quite an interesting conversation that never actually happened. But it just happened that way. And I think the second time around, I was like, I'm just going to be myself. And if they like me, they like me. And if they don't, they don't. And they did. And that's kind of where it began for me.
That is just so exciting. And how long were you on the show for?
I shot 5 seasons of that show.
Wow.
Which sounds a lot, but we were shooting a couple of year plus bonus seasons. So like Christmas season, like the Christmas ones too. So I probably did it for over a couple of years. If you followed my journey in it, it was quite a volatile up and down journey. I think I had one of the realest storylines in the show at the time. I feel like I was really mixed up within a web of family and relationships and friends, and I couldn't really figure out where I stood in the show either. I mean, seems to be a common denominator. Every time I get into something new, I never really figure out what I'm doing. So I was young. I was like 21 at this time.
So young.
I was thrown into this kind of world, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I'm not really sure I was ever built for it, to be honest.
And also the thing is, you see a lot of these, like the reality TV shows, and the people that are on them are on there because they want to be like TV stars. They've got the underlying thing of, I used to go to dance school, or I wanted to be a singer or an actress, and a reality TV show came up, and that was their opportunity to break through. And I could probably see that, you weren't like the boy at ballet class going, let be me, you weren't that guy. So to be mixed around that kind of thing and be thrust into the limelight when it's just not potentially even who you naturally are, and especially when you're uncomfortable, like in your shoes at that time, in front of millions of people watching, it's like, must be so tough.
Yeah, and I feel like because my family were in and around it, it wasn't anything really new to me.
Yeah.
Like, I was kind of been around it for a while. I'd watched them rise to fame. I'd watched when they'd go out, how they'd get treated, and I'd seen it all. So before I even got there, I knew how it was going to go.
Yeah.
And I mean, I couldn't. There's no way you could have prepared for what was really going to happen. But I'd seen enough to know, and some of these people that come on the show, especially now. I mean, if you want to get into the new series, it's now. And I think we're having quite a big problem with Love Island at the moment, whilst we're on the topic.
Yeah, tell me.
The problem is when these kind of shows start and you kind of get those original cast members in it, certainly for the first few seasons, they're so authentic and real.
Yeah.
There's no way they can copy anybody else.
Yeah.
So that's why we fall in love with these people. That's why they become super successful and they rise and their profiles blow up overnight. And we buy into them. We buy into who they are, their characters, their relationships, their family dynamic. That's what makes these shows great. The problem that I think Towie's having now, whilst they're on their 30th plus season, and
Wow.
I think Love Island are having now, they're probably into their double figure seasons. The people that were watching the originals at home years and years ago are now going on the show, and they've already seen the blueprint to what's successful.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily authentically their self. They're just copying what's already been done.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we're starting to see the figures absolutely plummet, because you've got Towie on the way down. It's been moved over to ITVX. You've got Love Island figures just been posted with the worst season ever. So I think it's because people are just not seeing anything new.
Yeah.
And they're just copying the same over and over again, just different people.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense, because it's like people are going on there, like seeing it as almost like a business opportunity. So that I'm going to be the character that I need to be to get into the show, to get what I want, rather than like the innocence of it, I guess, how it used to be. It makes so much sense.
100%. And I think when I came into the show at the time, there were people that had already been watching the show and new characters coming on, and they wanted it. They wanted it. They wanted that life. I felt like almost I'd been given it. I'd been handed it a little bit because of Joey and Chloe had already built that life. So I was already in it from my point of view. So I never really felt the need to really go out of my way and really scrape to the bottom of the barrel for any sort of storyline.
Yeah.
It just all kind of happened naturally for me. And that's probably what made me a big character at the time, but ultimately led me to leaving the show as well.
Yeah.
And
so for you to leave, was that your decision?
Yeah, that was my decision. Probably one of the handful to leave who made that decision. But I just come to a point in my life where I was very unhappy, and getting up every day was becoming a chore. And I just got to a point where I needed to make some really big changes in my life, and I made that decision that day, and I never went back. And I said, and along with some other things that were going on in my life, I made some big decisions as well, but that all played a part in the next chapter, really. So yeah, that was a tough time, but.
And how old were you then, Charlie?
Probably around 22, 23 max.
Okay.
So I was still pretty young, still trying to figure out who I was. Left, and if you want to really break it down so people understand, I wasn't just leaving a TV show. I was leaving my what seemed my purpose in life at the time, being a star on that show. What was my financial security, the machine that was paying me every month. So I left that behind, and I had no income coming in. I had no profile. I had no purpose when I introduced myself to anybody. No one, I didn't say that I was on a TV show. I was kind of in no man's land. I left relationships behind. I left family relationships behind at the time, which have been fixed now. But, it was a tough time for me as a 23-year-old. I was a young man, and I was kind of lost. But I knew that I had to make some significant changes if I was going to go on to be happy again, which was the main focus at the time.
Yeah. And if you don't mind me asking, was there one thing that made you unhappy, or was it just a general feeling of the person that you were right then was just not who you knew you were meant to be?
Probably a mixture of both. I think I'd let a lot of things build up brick by brick, and eventually it come tumbling down. And I felt like I wasn't really in the right environment doing the thing that I actually felt like I wanted to do. Never
Yeah.
really saw myself there long term. It was always a
Yeah.
case of like trying to get somewhere with it, and then maybe eventually once I get there I can leave. But that never really happened for me.
Yeah.
So I had to make the choice to come back and be a civilian, a real civilian again.
But that is really powerful at, 23 to be aware of yourself. Like, self-awareness is everything, right? And once you can, get that and listen to your intuition and listen to that inner voice, then you can take those actions to make, those next steps. But being in such a bubble, which, 100% of us look and want to be there and think that's the best place to be on earth, to be bold enough to step away from that, that's massive.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really did help me out long term was throughout my entire appearances on the show, I never stopped working. I never stopped hustling and trying to like create things, create businesses. And that was kind of where my entrepreneurship started, probably during that period. It was like trying to figure out how I can make the platform work for me long term. And that for me was probably the biggest blessing, because once I had made that decision to leave, although I had nothing successful to step into, I was comfortable with going back into the real world. I was comfortable with the making the cold calls, the emails, to going to meet people, to not having my ego blasted that I was too famous or too well known, or I shouldn't be meeting these people, or I should get somebody else to do it. I was the one who went out and did all of the work. And I think because I kept that mentality, that really helped me when I kind of stepped back into the real world on my own. And thankfully I did. And I managed to eventually build a business that worked for me long term. But there were a few speed bumps along the way and a few different experiences, and I explored a few different things, but I think that's all part of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're 23, you've left the show. For the next 8 years where you are, I mean, what you have built, I mean, and it just gives me goosebumps. I just love it. It's so exciting. But how did you get to the point where you're like, I'm going to do this and I know that it's going to be successful? Is it by trial and error? Is it something that's given to you, an opportunity? How did the things to where you are now arise?
Well, I used the fuel really that came from the show, because once I'd made that decision to leave and kind of give up ultimately what people saw as a successful role on the show. And I think being on TV, a lot of people think that, that's just generally quite a successful thing to do anyway. They just tend to pair the two together. I'd left that behind and I was like, I'm not going to be on TV anymore. And I need to go off and do something and be successful in my own right. And actually, I don't just want to be successful, but I want to demand some sort of respect. I want people to know that whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to be great at. And actually, the first thing I did, I set up a sports agency, because I sat myself down and I was like, what do I really love in this world? Like, what is it I want to do? And I was a huge fan of boxing. My dad's a boxing trainer, has been for the last 30 years, and he's trained major fighters. And he'd always take me to the shows growing up. I'd always be in and around the gyms, watching them train. And even when I was on the show, I'd always go to the events. Whenever there was a big event on, I'd always go and just enjoy sitting, ringside, just watching the fights. So I was like, I really feel like I've got a connection with these guys, and I really feel like I can start something fairly niche and new. And I looked at that market at the time and realized that being a sports agent in boxing at that time wasn't really a well-known job. So I decided to attempt to start my own agency, attempt to start working with athletes and doing sponsorship deals for them, negotiating their contracts for them, which again, I'd taken a little bit of that from myself from when I was in the show.
Yeah.
Social media had just started, Instagram was blowing up, Twitter was established, and we were doing paid posts. So I kind of knew how how that side of the market worked. I knew what you had to do. I knew what they were, what brands were looking for. So I kind of took that into boxing, and boxers started to become and started to endorse across social media. So that was kind of my first footing into that. And once I got my head around how that worked, I started branching out across lots of other different sports too. But I guess my rise really came from working with like some big names. I worked with Anthony Joshua for a bit. I was actually his tour manager when we did all of his appearances and tours. We did 2 national tours with him. And then I've worked with people like Ronnie O'Sullivan, who's like the king of snooker. And today I work with, and I'm fortunate to work with, world championship fighters, Joe Cordina, Conor Benn, who's a huge name, John Ryder, who's had a huge fight recently. So, I've built up a really good clientele of probably about 15 to 20 clients now.
Amazing.
Which took a long time to figure out. But that eventually evolved from a sports agency to a sports and media agency. And then what ended up happening was my sisters, who were all on the show at the time, they came to me and said, like, look, we've got agents, etc., and it's not really working out the way that we thought it was going to work out. You've obviously been a successful sports agent. Can you come and help us kind of use your experience and see if you can manage the deals that we're doing? So that's where that kind of relationship started on a professional level with my sisters. And then eventually that led on to Chloe, especially saying to me, like, look, I've done something like 12 years now of being on The Only Way is Essex. I was an original cast member. The show want me to stay. However, I think it's time that we probably look at our options and see what's next, which led on to the House of Sims.
Quick question. How did you get the mindset to keep going with something and believe in yourself so much that you know that you could make it successful? Like, have you done any personal development or inner work, or have you ever had a mentor? Because it's just so much success and self-belief to be able to not only promote yourself, but promote others in that way.
Yeah, I think actually self-belief, if you're going to go into entrepreneurship and you're really going to take the world on, you need to believe in yourself from the off. Yeah. And when I left the show, I told you earlier, I had that fuel in me, that fire in me to say that I'm not going to let anyone beat me, even though it was all hypothetical and it was all really, just between me and myself. I kind of used that fuel to go out there and say, right, well, if I want to be respected and I want to be successful, this is what I need to do. I don't have any GCSEs. I don't have a degree. I can't really go out and get a job. So what am I going to do? And I experienced some lows as well during that time, some personal lows. And really what that led me on to was watching some YouTube videos of Tony Robbins, who I had no idea who he was at that point. And I just looked up motivation, and I just looked up, what can who can kind of be somebody that I can inspire and take some inspiration from. And Tony Robbins was the first person I ever watched. And I just watched him for the first time, and I was like, wow, who is this guy? He's like talking directly to me. And then that led me on to listening and reading a lot about other people. And now I read all of the time. I've got so many books in my apartment at the moment. I've had moments where I've dipped in and out of reading, but reading really got me to the point where, one, I had that self-belief. I changed my mentality. I changed the way that I was going to operate in the world, especially in business. And it really came down to that education, self-education, that I think allowed me to develop into the entrepreneur that I am today. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made was I got to a certain point and I left the reading behind, which was a mistake. And I've picked it up again now, and I'm so happy that I have, because I feel like I'm developing again. I'm developing into this. Although people can say that I'm successful, I've achieved a lot at 31. There's still a lot that I need to learn.
Of course.
And I'm kind of really enjoying my reading journey again.
For our listeners, do you have top 3 books that you would recommend?
Oh.
Or top 3 like coaches or mentors that you listen to on YouTube?
Yeah, okay. I think if we're looking at a professional sense, and not actually just professional sense, these books can help you in life as well, which I think is important. I think some of the books, I've got some books in front of me. Actually, I'll give you 3 books that are sitting on my desk right now that are really good,
Yeah.
and they're on my desk for a reason. You've got Atomic Habits,
Yes.
which by James Clear, which is an amazing book. If you haven't read it, go to the bookshop now or Amazon now and get it. It will change your life instantly, almost as if the book was written for you. That's just about simple daily habits that can give you that extra 1% per day and can help your outlook and mentality on life and business change. So get that book. I'm reading a new book now by an author called Russ Roberts, which is called Wild Problems, and it's about the decision making that we make on a day to day, and that can either be in life or that can be in the professional environment, and why we have to make decisions and how and when these decisions are approaching us and how we deal with that. And I think decisions and choices, especially on a day to day basis, whether you're in life and you're talking about your house, your family, your relationship, or you're in work and you're talking about managing your staff, your clients, your vision for your business, we all have to make choices on a day-to-day basis, and the better we can understand how those choices are made, I think the better opportunity you're giving yourself to succeed. And I think there's another book here called Slight Edge, which is really, really good as well.
Love it. Yeah.
But I mean, I don't just read these kind of books. I've really dipped into, I'd say, the last year, and any sort of entrepreneur will understand this as well. You can be great at business. You can crunch the numbers as a CEO. You can manage staff. But if you're going to be a visionary for a business and you're going to adapt to your market all the time, which the market always changes and successful businesses have to adapt, the most important thing that I've started doing is reading books from creatives who are artists, who are actors and actresses, who might operate, art can be an author or even somebody who's in tech, somebody who creates something. And I've started reading those books because if you can get into a creative mindset and allow your brain and your aspirations to kind of come out, and you can start to see where you're going to go, where you're going to build, even where you're going to start, or even if you've got something that's established and where it can potentially go. That kind of comes from a creative part of our mind.
Yeah.
And I've started to allow my mind to become more creative. And I think the more creative I'm getting, the more success that I've seen, certainly recently anyway, in my business.
Oh my God, I've got goosebumps.
Yeah, I can give you some books on that too. But
Yeah.
I mean, really the creative side of it just comes down to whatever you might like, whatever you have a passion for. It might be music, It might be cinema, whatever you like. You just have to dive into what some of these people and tap into their minds and how they see things differently. And that's what, as an entrepreneur, we do. We see things differently to what the world sees it. And I think I've taken a lot of inspiration from that recently. So if I can give anybody advice, read the self-help, read the business books, but ultimately find something creative and tap into that. What are these guys seeing differently? How can you implement that into your life, into your business? That's one of my rules for success.
I love it. Charlie, quick question. Do you believe with work, like what we've just spoken about, the books and the audios, that anything is possible for anyone?
You do have to have there has to be a certain something in you. I do think some people are very, very comfortable with just being 9-to-5ers, being managed, told what to do, being managed on a day-to-day basis without having to make any sort of big decisions, big life choices. They just want to go off and do their thing, go to work, come home, have the rest of the evening, watch Netflix, whatever. That's fine. People can do that. I don't have any problem with that. I think when you start taking on entrepreneurship and you have to make those decisions for yourself and big life choices, and it's all on you, and it really is the big, that kind of big moment between failure and success, if you like. Some people just aren't built for that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you can discover and find out whether it is for you. And you have to kind of go on a journey. And I know as an entrepreneur, I've had many, many times where I've sat myself down and said, you know what? I would like to look at getting a job. I think it'd be much easier for me. I think
Oh
I'd
my
be able
God, I know what you
to sleep
mean.
better at night. And I feel
Yeah.
like the money would be more consistent. You know,
Yeah.
I think I'd be regarded as a really good employee, and I could be extremely creative, and I could be a really good asset to any company. But then you kind of click back out of that, and you're like, you know what? I don't think I can really be told
Yeah.
what to do, or have to be somewhere at a certain time and be told that I've only got an hour for lunch, and that's just me. That's just because I'm different, and there's nothing wrong with either of those sides. I understand both, but I'm just naturally a risk taker. I've always been somebody who rolls the dice, and that's just the way that I live my life.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have a morning routine, or like something that you have to do every day? Yeah.
I do have a morning routine, especially for work, because I think the weekends I do whatever I want, but I think that Monday to Friday, especially, you do have to have some sort of routine. Now, as entrepreneurs, you have the freedom, if you like, of waking up when you want, going to bed when you want, and not having to be anywhere the next day or do anything unless it's on your own time. But some of the things that I really have implemented, especially since moving to LA, because that move, and I'm sure you can relate to this, moving from where you moved to Ibiza, that move automatically takes you out of your comfort zone from the off.
Yeah.
And you're moving into a new place, new territory. You don't know where things are. You don't know there's nobody to call. And you're ultimately on your own. And in my case, I was with my family in Georgia, but I'm the one trying to drive things here and make things happen. And when I got here, it took me a bit of time to figure out the routine and how I was going to do things. I'm still operating on a UK time zone. I've still got my business there, and I'm operating here, trying to build something and expand something here. So I needed to figure out pretty quickly what I was going to do. And my morning routine isn't as detailed as some of these high performance gurus. Okay. My one is actually pretty simple, because if I can just nail these things, I can get up and I can just attack the day pretty well. And it's literally as simple as this. I have an external alarm that isn't my phone. Okay. Very important.
Oh.
You have to turn your phone off or onto a silent mode throughout the night so you don't get waken up. I have an Amazon Alexa at the moment with an alarm clock on it, which ultimately is controlled by my phone. But I set that alarm, for me, I set that at 8 a.m. every day throughout the week, and then 9 a.m. on the weekend. The reason why I do that every day, some days I get up earlier, naturally, because my body's now adjusted to waking up at that time every day, whether I need to be up at that time or not. 2, I don't go to bed until 12 midnight. So I know that my body needs roughly between 7 and 8 hours sleep to operate at its best. Everybody else differs. And the reason why I found that was I got a Fitbit. I looked at the metrics of my sleep, and I looked at the data and analysis, and it was like, okay, I'm operating the best when I'm on 7 or 8 hours. So from 12 till 8, when that alarm goes off, boom, I know that's when I need to start. Weekends, I set it at 9 because I want my body clock to still adjust to so when it comes back to Monday, I can get up again. Very important. 2, the first thing that I want to do is get out of bed, and that you have to open your blinds straight up, because if you don't do that, you're going back to sleep. Facts. It doesn't matter what time it is in the day. If you don't do that, if you don't let the sun shine in, you're going back to bed. Get up, bam, those blinds are straight open. And one of my favorite things to do is get outside. If you can get outside for 10, 15 minutes and let some sort of daylight hit you, which I know can be difficult in the UK because it's grey a lot, but just get outside, get that fresh air, walk the dogs, whatever it is, sit outside and have your morning coffee. Even if you have to put a coat on, just try and do it. So that's my second thing. And one of the most important things for me is would be breakfast, I think. I don't like to have a heavy breakfast, especially if I'm training. which I don't train every day. And I think if you can train or at least stretch every day, that's also important. But I don't always train every day. But breakfast for me is super important because I try to have a really healthy, nutrient, superfoodish sort of breakfast that will help fuel me, especially for the morning anyway, right through until lunch or dinner. And that could be a smoothie, which I'll have like greens, powdered greens, proteins, and all sorts of different supplements. I have like different vitamins and antioxidants and stuff like that. So those three things for me, I try to do every day.
Do you think that moving to LA has helped you do those things because they're just so much more wellness focused, aren't they?
I think, and you might experience this with Ibiza, the weather's just naturally better.
Yeah.
So, the sun, when you're waking up at like, let's just say 7:30 and you open your eyes for the first time and the sun's already beaming in.
Yeah.
It's just
and the sky is blue. It's the blueness of the sky.
Yeah. And you open those blinds and you're just like, yes, this is like great. And I don't have to look at miserable weather, grey weather, raining, because that will, I do not care what anybody says.
I know, I agree.
That will change your mindset automatically. You will not want to go outside. You will not be enticed to have a cold smoothie. You will want to get back inside as quickly as possible and get back into the bed and shut the blinds.
Yeah.
So all of these things that I am saying certainly are helped by being in a warmer country. But ultimately, I did try to implement these things when I was back home. And you just have to be consistent with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, those three things for me work every day. And if I can fit in some sort of reading before I kick off my morning, then that's great because I feel like reading helps sharpen my mind, gets me ready for kind of big conversations, helps me think differently after the kind of reset from my sleep. So, there's a few things that I'll do on a day-to-day, but them three things there are the main things, and they're very, very simple.
Yeah, so simple. Are your sisters into like growth like you are?
No, I don't think so. But, I think there's been a little bit of, the industry that they've been operating in and around is very, although they've been reality TV stars, when you're a reality TV star, and ultimately this could be the same if you was an actor or an actress, everything's kind of done for you.
Yeah.
You get given your script, you get given your dates and schedule for shooting. You already know what you're going to get paid before you even turn up because somebody else negotiates it for you and does it. The contracts are done, so you don't have to worry about that. And ultimately, you're shooting for a certain time frame, and then once you're done, you're onto a break, and you can go on holiday, and you just wait and get told when the next one's coming around. So I think for them, it was just a bit more like they don't really need to worry about driving things the way that I do, because one, I do it for them, and two, they're just not really those kind of characters.
Yeah,
they're quite happy to do that. And like I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with being that person. But all that really does is it just puts quite a lot more pressure on me because when things aren't going the way that they want them to go, they'll ring me up and say, hey, what's happening here? When are we going to do this? How quickly can we do that? So, that's kind of my job role.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the book called The Magic by Rhonda Byrne? You ever heard of that
No,
one?
but I have read Rhonda Byrne's...
the initial one was The Secret that she did.
The Secret, yeah.
Yeah, so The Magic is like just a book that it's probably like my all-time most favorite, but the most simplest thing ever is basically the magic is the practice of gratitude, like to be thankful and to implement that into your daily life and not to moan and to be, all of that kind of stuff. And I don't know if that's something that you're into. I mean, again, it's quite a like woo-woo, like LA thing, like I'm practicing gratitude, but it's life-changing.
Yeah, I do practice gratitude. I do it every Sunday. I do it once a week, really.
Oh, nice.
So when on my day off, I just sit there, and if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that I do Sunday sessions of gratitude, and I'll post 10 things, really small things, that would have maybe took for granted in regular life, And I just kind of flick back and I look at those moments and I just try to remember those moments. I mean, a lot of people sit down and do gratitude for all of the big things in life, but I've chosen to do the smaller things because those are the things that get missed. And ultimately, life, I mean, we can get really deep with this if you want, but I mean, life's such a precious, short experience. And I just want to kind of remember the small things that would usually come and go in every day. So I do that every Sunday. But yeah, I'm into gratitude. I'm into mindfulness. I've read I've read books about it. I try to practice it as much as I can. But all of those sort of things are good for you.
So good. But I believe that, we're talking to you about this, you're being this successful entrepreneur, but it's all of these things which people, don't necessarily see as important, but they're everything.
Well,
What takes you to that next level.
I'm going to give you a good example of why I do it. And I'll give you a good reason to why a lot of people should do it. The reason why I do it is because it humbles me. If I'm probably in this period in my life, I'm probably from the outside, externally doing quite well. But I have that fire built into me where nothing's good enough.
Yeah.
And ultimately, as hard as that is to probably understand, that's one of the reasons that's got me to where I am today, because I always want more. I always want better. This isn't good enough. I need to do more. And that's what's made me successful in my business life anyway. But from a personal point of view, I do happen to do that sometimes. And I do notice more now than ever that I do that, especially if I'm eating at a nice restaurant and I've eaten some really good food. Don't always necessarily compliment it and realise how lucky I am to be sitting at a table paying these people to cook me and my lovely fiancée some good food, or a lovely 5-star holiday. Not many people can do that. And ultimately, I'm extremely fortunate to be able to get on a plane and go to a hotel and eat amazing food and sit by the beach and do nothing and not have any problems. So for all of those reasons, I like to do it. It reminds me that actually I've come a long way, but I'm a lot further along than a lot of other people are. And I need to remember that. But I think the other thing is, and this is why I think other people should do it too, if you don't need that, it's kind of humbling, is that we live in a digital era today. And social media in particularly has become a world of comparison. And it's become a world of, I always want what that person's got. And I've done it. I'm sure you've done it. And there are a lot of young people out there that are coming into this world that are 18, 19, 20, 21 and wanting what somebody's worked their entire life for and wanting it today and wanting it now. And if they don't have it, they're becoming depressed or anxious and they're not getting by in life or they're not doing well. And actually, if you can practice gratitude and mindfulness, you'll understand very quickly that you're doing a lot better than what a lot of other people are doing in the world.
Yeah, I completely agree. Is there anything that's happened to you that made you realize that? Because, there are so many successful people that 100% don't have the self-awareness or mindfulness of that. It's just like, well, this is my life and this is what I expect. But, you seem to be really connected to others, I guess, and others around you and, in the greater world.
I think I've taken this responsibility on now. And you'll start seeing this as on my socials over the next probably year. I sat down with myself not too long ago and I said to myself, you've already been on a major TV show. You had a social media platform and you did not use it for the greater good. You didn't. Okay. You used it for clout and you used it for lifestyle. And ultimately, that's fine. I don't have any issues with if people want to do that. But I've taken it on as the responsibility for myself to put a bigger message out there now. And I think I want to help people that have been where I've been. And that's ultimately lost at multiple stages in my life. And I'm not saying that I'm going to be a role model or an iconic figure, but I might just have the answers throughout some of my experiences for people who are entering those stages of their life. And if I can share those on my socials, and if I can share those stories and gratifications and mindfulness and my entrepreneurial experiences and my books that I've just gone through with you, and I can give somebody who ultimately didn't have any GCSEs or degrees or, family opportunities or a good support system around them, I might just be able to help somebody, one person at least.
Yeah.
So if I can do that, then that's great. But if people want to use social media for what it is, I don't have any problem with that either.
Yeah. Just love that. What a beautiful soul you are, Charlie. So
Thank you.
nice. Question for you. What is the worst piece of advice that you have ever been given?
The worst piece of advice? That is a good question. I think, I don't know if it's a piece of advice, but one of the worst things you can do, ultimately, especially in a working environment, and when I worked, this is when I worked as a broker, and I was in and around a lot of men, a lot older than me, that ultimately I regard as good friends even to this day. But I got very caught up in believing other people's values and not my own. And that might be a case of, going out to certain places and doing certain things, and the way that they would talk about the world and talk about people, which doesn't make them bad people. It just meant that their values were different to mine. And I felt like to fit in, I had to have the same values as well. And I think now that I've been on this journey and this experience, if I was to re-enter that stage of my life, I wouldn't have to feel like that or do that anymore. And I think gradually, as time went on during that job and being in that environment, I changed my values and I changed my mindset quite a lot. And I think that's actually what allowed some of these people to respect me quite a lot more, because I wasn't willing to follow. I was willing to be my own person, even at a young age. And I think as a young person coming into a new job environment where there are going to be older people, certainly maybe more successful people, that doesn't mean you have to change your values on things. So that's probably one of the things that I would say look out for. If we're going to be talking about advice, I would look out for that.
So Charlie, talk me through the transition to LA. How you're working in your company, in the boxing agency. Your sister comes to you and said, I'm ready for a change. Let's do something. How did that conversation get you to where you are today?
Yeah. So she came to me, I was managing her for a little while. She came to me and said, look, I feel like, my days are the only ways Essex are coming up. I've been doing it a long time. Things, I think naturally were going like this, viewership wise. And ultimately she'd hit the ceiling to as far as she could go. She was one of the biggest stars on that show, one of the biggest reality stars in the UK. How much further can we really go with this? And it's just time for a fresh start and a new change. And my other two, Frankie and Demi, felt the same. They were like, look, we're ready to move as well. So, talking about and discussing what that move would be, the only thing we could really move to would be a family show.
Yeah.
And we would have some sort of control over the storyline. And ultimately, it would be more real. And I feel like, although Towie is a reality TV show, it's a community-based show, and you end up talking about things that are happening within a community and not necessarily your business and yourself, which is what causes the drama and what makes a good reality TV show. But for us, it was like, we've done this for many, many years. We don't really care what other people are up to. We just care what we're up to. And it's time for a change. And ultimately, I drew up a concept. I wrote the concept of the House of Sims. I went around pitching it to different networks. And very, very quickly, we were in contact with OFTV. OFTV are a new streaming platform. It's global, it's free, and they were looking for content. They had a huge US audience, and they wanted to bring in a UK audience and help drive those numbers. and they felt like they looked at this opportunity, felt like it resonated with their audience and the content that they needed to deliver. And that's how we struck a deal in the end. But yeah, it came down to me sitting in an office with the former CEO of OnlyFans and pitching that concept to them for the first time, which
Wow.
I'm usually quite comfortable pitching concepts across other industries, but this was new. This wasn't something that I was particularly comfortable doing. And I went in there and I just did it. And we eventually managed to get a deal done. Which,
And so did you do that on your own, or do you go in with your sisters? Or is it like, it's almost like, I feel like the Sims family is on your shoulders.
yeah, and it
You
was
are like
at
the
this
Kris
point.
Jenner of the Sims family.
It was at this point because it was like we really wanted the move, and
Yeah.
it was kind of coming around. The next series of Towie was coming around, so it was like, do we sign a new deal and get locked into another 2 series, which means it's going to probably be another year at least before we can come back around to this. Is there a window of opportunity here? And once we got into some deeper negotiations with OnlyFans TV, it was like, okay, I went in originally. I pitched my concept to OF. I was with my fiance at the time, Georgia, who worked for the huge project, but she ultimately sat there and watched me do it. And then the second time around, I went back. I had another deeper conversation. And then the third time around was like, okay, it's time to meet the Sim sisters, and it's time to bring them to the table, make sure we're all aligned, make sure they like us and we like them. And before we, really move into this big deal. And we went out for dinner, really enjoyed the company of Keely Blair, who's now the current CEO of OnlyFans, and she's been so supportive, alongside Olivia, who works with OnlyFans and works across this project in particularly. And it was at that moment where we were like, okay, let's do this. I feel like we're all on the same page, and contracts got drawn up, went through the negotiation period pretty quickly, and that was it. That was the defining moment that changed our lives, really. So I'm super grateful to Amy, who's the CEO at the time, Keely, who's the current CEO now, and the rest of the OnlyFans team who have backed us for this project. And I just, funnily enough, got the viewing figures back for season 1, and I was so shocked at how good they were. Honestly, they came through and I nearly fell off my chair. I was like, these are actually huge. Like, there's, if you're using a comparison to the last recorded figures on The Only Way is Essex, made in Chelsea, I mean, they've blown them out of the water. And that's an exclusive for you, because I only found that out a couple of days ago.
Oh my God, I love it. And also an American audience.
Yeah, we did have an American audience tune in, which was really interesting, and it was growing and growing every episode. But ultimately, the UK audience was the ones that blew them all out of the water.
Amazing.
And for the platform, that's what they wanted. It was the highest viewed British show that they'd had, and it was the highest viewed long form series on the platform as well. So brilliant news to get that. And because you never really know, we filmed the series, it went out, and you never really know who watched it until we get to see the viewing figures, which, as an exec and co-creator, I was fortunate enough to see. Oh my
God, yeah. But I mean, to move your whole family to LA. I remember the day that we packed our bags, literally sold everything we had, and we packed our bags with 9 suitcases to move to Ibiza. And although in my heart, it was always what I knew that I wanted to do. It was like, I'm 100% meant to be there. Like, this is my life. The night before, like, the sickness, I was so anxious. It was like my heart was pounding out my body with thinking, what the fucking hell am I doing? Like, Nicola, you don't even know anybody there. You don't know, like, what are we doing? But ultimately, it's been like literally the best decision ever. How did you feel moving, obviously, your sisters and your fiance? Like, come on, girls, like, let's go. Did you just know into your core that this was the right move?
I did for me. I think Chloe had the same mindset, and Georgia probably did as well. But we're quite a bit older than Frankie and Demi. So for me, it was always a dream to come to LA. I'd been here a few times on holiday. I'd experienced the lifestyle a little bit. I'd spent quite a lot of time here, and I just felt like going back to that kind of hitting a ceiling in the UK. It was like, well,
Yeah.
what are we actually going to do that could potentially go bigger and better and expand our lifestyle and really, take on a new journey. And moving to LA was that point where it was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
we've got production there. We've got a production house there that's going to be there for us. So we're going to move into that house. We're going to shoot the series. We've probably got 6 or 7 weeks of living there to really know. And then after that point, we're on our own. So, we're going to have to figure out, are we going to go home after 7 weeks? Are we going to extend, maybe stay in an Airbnb, maybe find a house or an apartment? Are we going to get to know certain areas? Because LA is a big place.
I know, yeah.
There's so many places to live here. So how are we going to get to know certain areas? Are we going to be able to drive on the other side of the road? There's a lot of a lot of considerations that we were taking in at that point. And for me, as soon as I got here, I knew. I was like, I'm not going home.
Yeah.
And I've got a house back home, and I said to Georgia, as soon as that period is up, production period, I'm going to give us 5 days. We're going to fly back home. We're going to pack our whole house up in 5 days, empty it, and then we're going to fly here, and then we're going to put everything in storage, and then we're going to fly back here, and we're going to find a place to live. And that's what we did. And I knew if we had any longer than 5 days, which is a realistic time frame to pack your entire life up, if we had any longer than that, we may never have come back. So we did do that. We did 5 days. My sister did it as well. And then we came back and we got a house.
I have got goosebumps.
Yeah. And
just
we haven't
love
left.
it. Gone. Charlie, what is next for you? You are this visionary. You're clearly at the very, very beginning, really, of your journey. I feel like you're so in your power and so in your body that what you're going to create next is just going to be like huge. What do you see for yourself?
I think at the moment, I'm really conscious of my time. And I think I'm so busy now with my agency is still running in the UK. I'm expanding it out to here. So I'm going to definitely take on more clients. So I'm just a bit conscious of how much time I have. 2, the House of Sims Series 2 is about to shoot in September. So I know for that certain time period, I'm going to be extremely busy. And I know that we've got a couple more series to do after that. But I guess for me on a personal level, what's next? I've got a passion project that I'm working on called Soul Seekers Magazine. And it is going to be a magazine, but predominantly an online magazine that's going to be focused around self-help, improvements, ecological awareness, all the things that I feel passionate about, all the things that I want to share. But ultimately, I want to get people on the show, whether it's going to be a podcast and to feature in that magazine, high-profile people to come on and share their experiences and 2, their values, and to really give people who might not have the deepest education in all of these topics some sort of enlightenment. And I think that's what this is about. I'm not an expert in any of those. I'm not an expert in mindfulness. I'm not an expert in gratitude. I'm not an expert in self-improvement. I'm not even an expert in business or entrepreneurship. But if I can get somebody on who is and can just explain a little bit more about what they do and how they feel and the causes that they support and the changes that we can make as a person or maybe as humanity, then I think we can make the world a little bit better.
Amen. Love, love, love. Charlie, my final question for you that I give to every single guest that's been on the podcast is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
If I had to go back, if I had to roll back the years to my younger self and I really spoke to myself, maybe when I was like 20, which I think was probably a good age because you're really entering the world. After you've left school and living at your parents, and 20 is like the point where it starts getting a bit serious, I think. I'd probably just say you have a lot more time than what you think. I feel like I rushed into a lot of things. I made a lot of poor decisions. I made a lot of poor financial decisions because I didn't have the money. And I think ultimately you have a lot more time, and to use that time to explore, to be curious, to experiment, to try different things, which I have along the way. And I think the advice that I'd probably give to myself is just try your best at everything. And then you'll see eventually what will happen.
Yeah.
Keep your values, keep your morals, be a good, honest person with integrity, and you'll be all right.
Thank you so, so much. This has been an amazing, enlightening, wonderful, open conversation. And I think the bit for me, I feel like it's going to really surprise people. People are going to go, oh, you know, that's Charlie Sims, you know, from the reality TV show. And when then they hear you speak about the topics that we've spoken about, they're going to be like, oh, this shit is deep. And I love that, because that...
Everybody does. Everybody who talks to me doesn't expect me to talk like this. I don't know why. I don't know what I come across as on TV. I must come across as a complete...
No. But, you know, in those shows where they're not encouraged, you know, let's talk about gratitude, girls. Like, what are we grateful for today? You know, it would be a whole different show. So it's just the surface of, obviously, you know, the platform, but who you are is, you know, it's great. And I think it's actually really inspiring. For people to go, oh my God, you can be. And I think that's really, for me, what I love is that you can be this reality TV star with a huge social media following, and also into spirituality and be mindful. It's like you can marry the two together. And I ultimately, that is true success, right? Having both of those areas filled.
Yeah. And also just have fun.
Yeah.
Just have fun. Like, just, you know, I try to have fun a lot of the time. I try to wake up with a positive mindset. I try to laugh and joke with my friends, my family as much as I can, and just have fun. Life, you know, life, like I said earlier, it's a short experience. So just enjoy it as much as you can.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nicola. I appreciate it. It was great talking to you.